Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of the New Standard. On my left, I have my partner in crime, Neal Coolong. What's happening, Neal?
Plenty, Lance, plenty. But I think the main point here is the aftermath of yet another addition to the game that we will have for a show later on this year titled, Which Was the Worst Steelers Game of 2021? And I believe we have five candidates for that now, legitimate
Okay.
candidates.
Yeah, we do a poll for that. That'll be very interesting because there are definitely quite a few. But before we hop into that, if you want to participate and get involved with the program and follow the program, we have multiple ways. I think I'm going to try to push the podcast side of it a little bit more going into the 2022 season. So if you want to join the show via podcast, we are available on Apple Music. We are also available on Google, Spotify, or any particular podcast platform. And for some reason, Neal has hopped off, but I'm sure Neal will hop back on pretty shortly. Also, if you want to catch the show live, the best way to catch it, of course, is to go to the YouTube channel and do a search for Lance Williams and or Neal Coolong and the New Standard, or some combination of Pittsburgh. And big up to Neal in the background with the Minnesota North Stars beanie. And before we hop
Forever.
on the program, we were talking a little bit about hockey. And congratulations to you, Neal, on the move. I'm glad it came out safely and you're all in one piece. So hopefully you had a nice Christmas. I did. And hopefully everybody out there listening to the program had a nice Christmas. But let's jump into this program. And before we do, let me give you the title of the program. Where do the Steelers go from here after an embarrassing loss to the Kansas City Chiefs? And before we do that, please do a search for @SAD, SADPLANTZART, Sad Plants Art. That's my daughter who's making some of her artwork available via NFTs. So look for that, Sad Plants Art, and also big up to Great Dads versus everybody. But Neal, enough of me. I want to open up the floor. And typically we look at a number to describe this game. I have a very interesting number because I think it really illustrates just how bad this game went. I thought the game would be maybe about 30-17. That was my prediction. I got it right on the Chiefs side because they had 30 plus points. But needless to say, the Steelers with the garbage touchdown hit double digits at the end of the game to Deontay Johnson. So Neal, what number, in your opinion, most reflects this particular game and the outcome?
I dug into this, Lance, and I wasn't exactly sure, but the one number I came up with to describe this game is suck, because really there was nothing remotely positive about this game. It's not often that you lose by 26 points in the NFL, and the score is not indicative of how one-sided it was. It was that bad. They didn't do anything well. They didn't show up. I mean, like I said at the beginning, we can have this conversation about several games this season. This one sticks in my craw, I think, probably more than anything, because really I became disinterested after the opening drive, which didn't look good for the Steelers at all. After the Chiefs opening drive, the Steelers had punted, and then the Steelers turned it over on their next one, and you knew it was over at that point. They didn't compete in this game. They had no chance from a pretty early start, and the Chiefs did not have Travis Kelce. It doesn't get much worse than that.
And they had a Tyreek Hill who clearly was running a 4.4, not his normal 4.2.
They only gave Hill the ball twice. They threw the ball twice to Tyreek Hill in this game. They got shredded by something called Byron Pringle. I thought Derek Gore was the guy who caught that deep pass at the end. I thought that was Frank Gore. I really did.
His nephew.
We've seen Mecole Hardman, but come on. If these guys, how about this? If you really want the number, the one I was truly going for before the big dunk shot that I tried was the fact that the Steelers had 5 receivers with more than one catch who averaged under 10 yards a catch. And the
Wow.
Steelers had one receiver with more than one catch that averaged over 10 yards a catch. That was Chase Claypool with 4 catches for 10.3 yards. You're not doing anything offensively if you can't get the ball down the field. Whatever the game plan was, the Steelers didn't execute anything well, and there's just nothing redeeming about this game at all. There's not even really much of a point dissecting more than what we saw. Nobody played well. I've said all year Ben is not coming out of the game. It was pretty obvious that Ben was going to come out of this one. That's how bad it was.
And I'm glad you said that, because that leads me to my number. And big up the Steelers Freak, and big up to everybody that's hopped onto the chat. And Steelers Freak put up a decent stat here, or a good stat here. 6 games with no TD in the first half, which is the worst since 1940.
I mean, that sounds like a joke.
That is
score for
Steelers
that
Freak.
Games in a row.
Freak, do me a favor. God. Please confirm that number and send us the source of that number, because, like Neal said,
I've seen it. I'm sure it came from the Steelers. Well, I'm not sure the Steelers stat department would want to look that up, but I've seen it around a couple places, and it absolutely feels like that's the case. I didn't verify it myself, but it seems legit.
You know what the incredible thing about that is that the way the NFL is designed now, in terms of the rules and the way defenses play in the National Football League overall, defenses will give you completions. They'll just give up completions. They'll give up certain completions. They don't want to give up big plays, obviously, in the passing game. So there are a ton of completions that you can get in a game to set you up to score a touchdown, where you get in the red zone, you confuse them, you scheme up something nice, you get a weakness, you get your best guy on a bad guy or a backup or a sub, they make a mistake, or you just get a guy that makes a great play, you score a touchdown. You should fall into a touchdown in a half. Like, you should just fall into a touchdown. It shouldn't be. There's no way to have 6 games with no TD in the first half.
That's the thing. One game, okay, I get it. You can have a rough half. 2 games, you're in a pretty bad slump, but 3 is compelling. Twice that, you've got some serious problems in every area of your offense. And I think that's the best way to describe Pittsburgh, at least what we've seen of them since basically the Lions game forward, has been a dreadfully ineffective offensive team. If we want to line up everybody's single file and distribute blame that way, we can start with the offensive coordinator. I know that everybody does. We said at the beginning of all of this, Lance, Matt Canada is not coming in to save this team. They're not good enough. They don't have talent. They're calling plays, in my opinion, that fit their talent, with the exception of, and highlight this comment, that 4th and 1 call was infuriating to me. And anybody who has watched this show and seen me on this knows I'm not somebody that makes a huge deal out of play calling. I get the value of it. I take it in a vacuum. Or I should say I take it collectively throughout the game.
Or
there are independent issues that you look at.
Yeah. You take it from the perspective of most play calls aren't successful. They set up other stuff. It's the whole painting. Looking at one play call is sort of like looking at the corner of a painting before the painting is done. You're like, what does that look like? But when you see it all together, then it makes sense.
Do a lot of things with every call, but at the same time, your specialty downs, the real situational football downs, 4th and 1 is absolutely one of them. A weak side toss to Najee Harris is probably close to the bottom of calls I would have made in that situation. Najee Harris is not fast. Okay, Mike Tomlin, he is not fast. I don't give a rat's ass how many yards he ran for at Alabama. He is not fast. That has been the problem with him his entire career. He didn't break plays in college. He's not going to beat an NFL defense to the edge. You don't even have a tight end out in front blocking it. To say nothing of the fact that nobody was out there. It was ridiculous. He ran sideways to the sideline. It looked like a Pop Warner game.
And you know why he had to run sideways, to your point about the tight end? And I'm going to get to my number, because Neal, talking about Ben coming out is a perfect segue to the number that I'm going to give that best describes this game. When they ran the play, and Mel, big up to Melvin, pointed it out as well. What the hell on 4th and 1, and we toss a run sweep, and no one was lined up to the left side of the center. The QB sneak gets a first down. I mean, to that point, when they ran the play, because I'm watching the game afterwards on the 45-minute NFL Game Pass. So watching it when you know the outcome is a little bit different. You're not as emotionally invested. So I wasn't throwing TVs or throwing shoes at TVs when I saw the call. But all I did was laugh, because when they ran it,
awful.
There were like 6 Chiefs literally horizontal to the line of scrimmage waiting for Najee Harris. And no disrespect to Najee Harris, but the one thing he is not is fast or elusive. Najee Harris is a magnet, and tackles are metallic objects. They are drawn to him, and he gets hit by multiple people every time he carries the football. So you need someone elusive in that situation, or you just need to sneak it. That was a terrible call. That was
you need to do something other than trying to make a defense move laterally against a non. He's not fast. I can't say that enough. At the very least, on a stretch play on the short side of the field to weak side, what you're trying to do is outrun them to the corner. There is no way Najee Harris is going to do that. And say hello to my daughter.
Civil War running
pop
back.
Into the picture in the background here. It's a Civil War running back. Yes,
he's
good.
A Civil War running back.
Coin that
North and South. Civil War guy.
He does not have the speed or the athleticism to outflank NFL defensive ends on a 4th-and-1 play. And you put him 6 yards behind the line. You're asking him to outrun guys. He's got to run like 15 yards to get to that spot. It was dead from the beginning. My reaction the second I saw the ball going to him was, oh, for fuck's sake, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way that's going to work. There is no way that was going to work.
And I'm sorry, Marcus J. I'm laughing at Marcus J. He said, you guys are wrong. He makes people miss all the time. Maybe the 4th tackler misses. But by the time should we
look at some numbers? Let's talk about making guys miss, all right? Because it seems like it takes all of his effort to make one guy miss, and then the 4 others that walk up to him and jump on him put him down where he lies. That's why he averages 3.5 a carry.
Like Melvin said, downhill runner, all pro eye backfield, 46 or 45 power. Like he's a straight between the tackles. And Steelers Freak said more like the War of 1812.
Thinking just World War I.
But he is
the Western Front.
He's a Civil War running back. He's absolutely a Civil War running back. Let me give you my number. Because when you were talking about, how Ben Roethlisberger, and we talked about it, that was the deal that was made between the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger for the redoing of the contract was he was going to play all the time. So it was significant to see Ben Roethlisberger come out the game. And so my number is 10. The number of snaps that Mason Rudolph got in the game. Mason Rudolph got 10 snaps, 14% of the offensive plays. That's my number. And when you see Mason Rudolph get into a game in which Ben Roethlisberger is healthy, that might be the worst game of the year. That's the white flag.
It didn't happen much throughout his career. That did not happen much.
Oh, that's the white flag give up game.
Yeah. I mean, it's the flip side of this is probably what's most fair and realistic. This should have happened multiple times at different points to date. Not saying that I wanted that or it's helping anything, but they've been in the situation that Rudolph came in a couple times this year, and they didn't do it. Fine. I mean, I don't think it's not telling. It's not saying anything. I just mean that it happened it finally happened. They finally got to this point. That's where they are right now. And that we got to that feeling of this game very quickly into it. They never competed in this game. It's just like the Cincinnati game. Didn't compete from the first snap of the ball throughout the rest of the game. 4.5 yards an attempt for Ben Roethlisberger. Oh my God.
And that leads me to Wes Hickok's statement. Big up, Wes, longtime listener. Thank you, Wes, for all the support over the years. And Wes said, good God, no heart last night at all. And this is one thing I don't do. And as a longtime boxing fan, I never question boxers that go in the ring and get destroyed, because the heart that it takes to get into uh, the ring, even to get knocked out and starched within 30 seconds, the fear, the anxiety, all that you deal with to get in the ring is significant. So I put respect on their names, even if you're a trash boxer. So I don't think the Steelers, I don't think it's a lack of heart. What I think is, for the fan base, I think it's unrealistic expectations. I was just riling people up on Twitter last night. For the fan base, I think a lot of it is unrealistic expectations in terms of what this team is. And I get it. That's part of being being a fan, is that the glass is always half full, not half empty. So you go into games with the thought that things are going to be positive and things are going to be good, and at least your team will at least give the Joe College try or effort, whatever it is. But sometimes you're just not that good. Your expectations are off, and
Yeah.
another team is better.
The other team is better.
You're playing a team that I believe, won what, 7, 8 games in a row, was the number one seed in the AFC. I mean,
7 games, but 8 if you count the scrimmage they played yesterday.
So you were going against a hot team on the road late in the year. The disheartening thing is they destroyed the Steelers without their two of their best offensive players, because Hill basically wasn't there. They destroyed them with other guys. And it wasn't like they just threw it over their head. It was just kind of like 7-on-7. We'll just run our stuff. No pressure. I think the Steelers got 1 sack in the game. TJ Watt didn't have any impact on the game. I think they maybe got 1 sack from Cameron Hayward, where they played the Steelers as if we don't have much to worry about in this game. Highsmith,
Yeah.
and indeed and Hayward played in this game. They looked comfortable the whole game. That was the disheartening thing for me, is that, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment, is where do the Steelers go from here in the 2021 season? Because when you looked at this game, it's sort of like, in sports, a lot of times when you think you're really good or you're a good team and you're blossoming, sometimes you get that game where you get a comeuppance and you realize, damn, we ain't really that good. Like, wow, we just got reminded. They got reminded last night of the difference between the number one seed and a team competing for a Super Bowl and where they're at. They're in 2 different, distinct places. So with that said, looking at the playoff picture, and as we jump into this definition of a foundation of where they can go from here, look at the playoff picture. The Steelers right now are sitting at the 11th seed. Is there any way in your mind they maybe split these last 2 games, scratch and claw their way into the playoffs? And is it more beneficial for them to make the playoffs, or to, even if they don't, like, is it more beneficial if they play 1 playoff game, get smashed, as opposed to not going? Is there any benefit in that?
I think learning to win starts with effort. Playing to win helps teach you how to win. Making the playoffs becomes kind of I won't say artificial, but that's not necessarily the only indicator of growth as a team. We knew this team was going to fall off this year. The fact that they are still mathematically alive for the playoffs, in my opinion, is more the result of a division that can't separate itself. The only global truth of the AFC North this year is that the Bengals are going to kick the hell out of the Steelers or the Ravens if they ever play. Beyond that, you have no idea what you're getting from any of those teams any week. So making the playoffs shows that they were good enough to basically walk and stand on the edge of where all the good teams are. Are they going to do anything in the playoffs? Absolutely not. There's no way. I don't to put it mildly, they're not going to win a playoff game. I don't think they're going to go to the playoffs. I never thought they were going to go to the playoffs.
Yep.
Learning that, though, through effort and not through this completely overblown and misleading idea generated by fans that the difference between your spot and the team 3 picks ahead of you is a Super Bowl in 2 years. It is complete and total nonsense. You're drafting basically 1, 15, or you're in the 20s. All right. There are precipitous drop-offs in the availability of talent in an average draft. And even with that, the draft is specific to what you need, not to what the global population has available to it. You draft for one team. You do not draft for the league. You do not draft for the players. You draft for your team. Okay. Kendrick Green, we're going to bring it up, who is apparently the bane of all existence. He's so bad, he's costing the Steelers 5-6 games this season alone. He was drafted in the 3rd round, not the 1st. Okay. Kendrick Green, Creed Humphrey. Yes, these guys were both available in the first 2 rounds of the draft. To compare the two as if they're equal, because one was on the board and we didn't take him and you waited and you took another guy, is at the same time refusing to accept there were several players probably better than Kendrick Green that they did not take in the 2nd round. That's why Kendrick Green was taken in the 3rd round, okay? He's not a 2nd round player. Don't say you could have drafted Creed Humphrey and you didn't because you wanted Kendrick Green in the 3rd. That there's nothing factual to base that on. What I know is even if they had Creed Humphrey, a left-handed center who a lot of quarterbacks don't like dealing with, even if they had drafted Creed Humphrey, if that was the case, they would not have a reasonable tight end. And that would be a position they'd need to address this year. Sexy tanking, Lance. What did they feel that they needed immediately? That's what they took. Somebody had to be the odd guy out. You don't have enough premium picks, so that the constant reevaluation of the draft and pun intended, centering the world around Creed Humphrey is intellectually garbage. It's simply not an issue. They needed a tight end. They needed a center. Which one would you rather have an elite player at, tight end or center?
I'd rather have a tight end.
I'd rather have a tight end. Okay. If you're arguing with me about that, I'm sorry. You don't know what you're talking about. Nobody is going to disagree with that. You can find good centers in free agency all the time. If they really have a problem with Kendrick Green, despite the fact that his first year offensive line coach is clearly in over his head and isn't going to have a job next year. All right. Can we get into that a little bit? Or we're probably going to. Just briefly, though, Adrian Clem is connected to the Oregon job that's available. You do not leave an NFL position coach job for the same position coach job in college unless you're not being asked back, okay? So he's essentially getting fired. They're removing him, okay? Part of that is perhaps because Kendrick Green has been an abomination to mankind. Dan Moore doesn't look like he belongs out there either. But the reality is they didn't have much of a choice, okay? Creed Humphrey, who apparently now is Dermontti Dawson all of a sudden, he is not going to come in and fix that offensive line. Whoever they would get in the hypothetical situation, whoever they would get to replace Kendrick Green is not going to solve the offensive line. They need a lot of things. Green is just the scapegoat currently. I don't think Trey Turner's very good, okay? He's not playing well. The savior of everything, PFF's hero for Steelers fans, Kevin Dotson, he didn't do all that great, okay? Dan Moore shouldn't have been playing at all. It's almost cruel to keep him out there at this point. He's not any good. It's not just Kendrick Green. He's just the guy that you guys see, and you see somebody on Twitter take a pot shot at and run with that as if that's the entire story. There are problems with all 5 players. There are problems with depth, and there's problems with coaching. They're going to address all of those things, and that was always something they were going to do. So let's not act as if every time you draft a center, it means he's expected to be your starter for 10 years. That's just not feasible. You can't look at it like that. They probably need to address the position, in my opinion. I think they need to bring in a veteran. I feel that that's something they're going to look at. I think that's an option that should be available to them if they review all of it. But there are a lot of things that they need to do. that are not just about Kendrick Green.
And I want to speak to some of the comments that Frank Manfredi is making, and welcome Frank to the show. And he's making a comment that look at the last Steelers 3 centers and look at this guy. We can't throw to a tight end when there are 3 guys living in the backfield.
I remember Sean May. He was there. The other guy, what's his nuts? Hartwig, Justin Hartwig.
Yeah,
he wasn't
Justin Hartwig. Yeah,
people act like they're rolling off Hall of Fame players. Pouncey was not a Hall of Fame player.
The other thing I say is, and we're just having a little bit of technical difficulty with Neal. The one thing I also say is, and Neal, we got you back. Just a little technical difficulty. Sorry about that, listeners. The one thing also is, as fans, we have no patience either. There is a possibility that next year, Kendrick Green with a new offensive line coach, and we're going to get into where they go from here and how do they move forward. Maybe he's better. Maybe he's just not playing at his natural position, and he has to play that because that's what the situation is. This is a rebuilding team. This is a sexy tanking team. So, what happens if Kendrick Green somehow is better next year as a result of all of these experiences? I think the only thing that is scary about his play this year is he's actually regressing. You don't see him improving. And Mel made a nice comment.
I think I did. Honestly,
Neal exploded the Wi-Fi.
I might have.
I love it. It gets on a good rant. But let me jump into this question about where do they go forward? And me and Neal were talking about the word foundation. And the definition from Webster's, there's a couple of definitions. The first is the lowest load-bearing part of a building, typically below ground level. But that's a good reference too. And the second definition, kind of the one we'll probably focus more so, but it could be both though. An underlying basis or principle. This idea is the foundation of all modern economics. And I think we've all concluded that even if they do go to the playoffs, and there's the value there, we've talked about it. Your work is informed. Okay, this is the level of work that got us to this point. We can add to it. We could do some things smarter or better. It lets us know that some of the pieces that we've put in place might be good enough to compete and answer some questions and inform some of your work. So it's a good thing. But moving forward, when we talk about this definition of foundation, and I'm going to give you my perspective first. Well, actually, I'm going to get Neal's perspective first. On foundation, when you look at an organization and you look at a franchise, it's composed of different things. Front office, you've got the team, you've got the business itself. Foundation. When you think of foundation of a football team, where does that lie for you? Does it start on the coaching side? Does it start with the team? Where is it? Where is it for you just from the 60,000 foot perspective in terms of foundation?
Foundation to me is you have commitment, you have buy-in. And a large part of that is from a front office perspective, you have a good plan. You're moving towards something specific. And oftentimes that's the best part of a plan. It is a direction. You are deciding to do something definitively. Okay. That to me means you've got a good core of young players on cheap contracts. You've got good veterans who are leaders that you can build on. They're not selfish, maybe, not making a huge amount of money, but they're there for the commitment of the team. And you believe in that. They believe in that direction as well, that the general management ownership is laying out for everybody. When you have that, you can build on it. It's not easy to build on it. It's not easy to get it. But when you have that, that's when you can move forward. And I hate to say this because it's going to piss off Steelers fans. I see Cincinnati as the team that has that. And I've ripped on Cincinnati plenty for not being able to win non-emotional games for them. And that's going to be a problem for them. They're going to need to figure that out. I am not a fan of Zach Taylor's. I really think that keeping him I don't think it's going to work out well for him in the long run. Wouldn't be the guy that I would want leading the team. I don't think he's at the point that he can direct this beyond what he has. But I also think that Joe Burrow is a future 2-3-time MVP. He's that good. And we're seeing that up and down now. He is leading that group. He is the centerpiece of their foundation that they're building. They're adding the right pieces to it. They did a phenomenal job in free agency. So they've hit in that regard. They hit in the draft. We can get into their coaching issues at another time, but it appears that they have the right kind of foundation that's coming together. Now, at the same time, I might have said something similar about the Browns last year, and I'll admit that I was probably not right about that. But the jury is still out there.
But they got Baker Mayfield, which kills all foundations.
Maybe. That's hot and cold. It's a lot harder to argue with that today. Okay. Mayfield was hurt for a good chunk of the season. Let's keep that in mind. It's hard to do the things he's doing with the injuries that he had up to this point. And I think things have just kind of gotten away from them now. But I was a big fan of the coach that they brought in. Most specifically, I was a big fan of their decision 5 minutes after hiring the head coach to hire the offensive line coach and not let the head coach make that decision on his own. Bring in somebody qualified to do it. That is exactly what the Steelers need to do next season. To me, excuse me, that is a part of the foundation. You need to have.
Let me stop you there before you get into specifics, because I think you hit on something. And when I think of foundation, I think it first starts with the organizational side.
Yep.
And I think you have to have. I think the foundation starts with. And I'm going to use the analogy of the house. So we're going to use the first definition, and we're going to integrate the second definition as well. If you want to build a house, probably the most important decision of building the house is selecting the right contractor and subcontractors. If you don't have the right contractor, and the contractor in this case, in my opinion, of course, is the Rooneys, but they don't do football stuff. Is the GM coach aspect. That's the contractor. The subcontractors, in my opinion, are the assistant coaches. Now, you talked about Clem being over his head. We've talked about Matt Canada, some of the coaches. I think right now, the foundation, so when you look at the contractor and the subcontractor, the contractors make the overall plan. They are the foundation. They draw the blueprint. They do all that stuff. And the subcontractors, along with the head coach, help execute that plan. When you look at the foundation of the Steelers from that perspective, is that foundation sound in your opinion?
It's impossible to say that it is. I don't think there's any way we can discuss what we have seen this year in a way that isn't. They got away with really weird wins, like against the Titans. They had nail-biting wins, largely on the strength of individual players, i.e. TJ Watt. That to me isn't a foundational step. That was more, they have some dudes, it's not just like they're starting from scratch here with a rookie under center, like they're Jacksonville. I think they have good upper management. I think they have a good head coach, and I think that head coach, you get the best from Mike Tomlin when the talent isn't very good. We can argue when the talent is really good, maybe we don't get the best from Tomlin. Maybe it's not really what he's there to, that's not his greatest accomplishment. He's not necessarily the coach you're thinking of if the team has a 14-2 roster to be able to close it out. He's the guy that is going 8-8, 9-7, 10-6 previously with rosters that look more like 6-10. Tomlin gets the most out of lesser talented players, and that's why what we're seeing, in my opinion, is a team that played multiple games this season, like they're picking in the top 3, multiple games this year.
Yes.
Yet they're going to finish with at least 7 wins and maybe 8. It's not impossible. They might pull out a non-losing season from this. That is Tomlin in my mind. it's the coach that you probably need right now if you don't believe in just tanking for a year, which you and I have talked about this. We don't, I don't think it wins anything. It doesn't help you in any way. Um, they have foundational issues that they need to address. Um, at the same time, though, I really think it's unfair to have this conversation without at least acknowledging they're playing with Joe Jack from down the street on their defensive line right now.
Mondo.
They are playing with scrub nobodies in their front seven outside of a guy named TJ Watt, who has a hip injury, a knee injury, and broken ribs. All right. He's not going to do much. It's just not going to happen. And we saw that yesterday. He's out there, but he's not going to do anything. He's not going to be a difference making player. If you have that along with Cam Hayward having played 110% for 14 consecutive games, he has very little left. And there is nobody picking up the slack. Nobody.
So right now,
you're not going to win much with that.
So right now, you would say that Mike Tomlin is the ideal coach for a rebuild. He's the guy that's going to get the most out of the talent. And I love where people are going with the comments here when we're using this metaphor of foundation, because Grayson said, and to my point about selecting the subcontractors, the contractor and the subcontractors, he posed the question, before that lands, you have to select the proper land which to build on. And my question to him was, in our metaphor, and Charmingly Sophisticated chimed in and said, perhaps the land could be the philosophy on how to structure the foundation. So when you look at the land and this whole analogy and the foundation of the house, are the Rooneys the land, or is the land the plan, the overall plan? Because I love your point about Tomlin is maybe Tomlin isn't the Phil Jackson coach where you have Jordan, Pippen, you have Tony Kukoc, Ron Harper, you have Dennis Rodman, and you win, or the Pat Riley where you've got thoroughbreds and you're steering them in the right direction and letting them go and managing in that way. And Steve Kerr to a certain extent as well as another example. In terms of the subcontractors, and we'll get to this question about the land, and thank you, Charmingly Sophisticated S, for chiming in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the program. Do they have the right subcontractors? A lot of chatter on Twitter, and it happens every week, and we know that that's going to happen. As fans, we get emotional. Is Butler the right guy? Is Matt Canada the right guy? Or are we going to see positional coaches get changed out other than Clem?
I think that's an excellent question. I would say this. Here's what I have heard from within the Steelers organization. This is absolutely something they're not going to cop to or admit to. Mike Tomlin does a great job of being the shield for everything. He's the meat shield, the guy that's going to take the upfront criticism and abuse while everything operates behind him the way that they want to do it. They don't tell you what they're doing. Okay. No NFL team really reveals much about how the secret sauce is being made. What I have heard is basically since 2016, Tomlin has been the one handling the defensive play calling. In that, what that says is if what Keith Butler is doing as the defensive coordinator is worthy of him being terminated, what does that say about Mike Tomlin? So you've got kind of right. You hooked your plow to this mentality going on. It does raise a fair question, though. If it's not Butler, then are you going to tell me that it's Tomlin? Do you want to keep doing that? Why does Butler need to be there in the role that he is in? And I think on one hand, you can say, well, he's coaching the linebackers, drawing up the concepts and helping teach it is vastly more important overall than calling it on game day. People think that it's Madden and you just plug in all these plays that they learn telepathically at some point. That's what practice is. They are teaching. They are going over things. They are drawing stuff up. That's what a coordinator is doing, okay, and making sure that all these things are being done. The position coaches are working directly with the players. When a head coach is calling the plays, you still have a coordinator who's putting all of it together. So there is a relationship between Butler and Tomlin that they're obviously working together. If one is a problem, then both of them are a problem.
Right.
So perhaps
by proxy. Yeah, by
perhaps
proxy.
that kind of tells you a little bit about what they may or may not do. At the same time, I don't know how much of this season defensively we can really blame on X's and O's, because once again, you're looking at garbage in their front seven. They have never been this thin in their front seven. They have nothing left. There is nothing left there. This is Cam Hayward's most admirable season. In my opinion, if this ever, the good Lord blesses me enough to ever have this, if I get a Hall of Fame vote, I'm pounding the damn table for Cam Hayward. If for no reason, look at what he has had to do this season. It's insane. The amount that he has to do for this team to even be bad is ridiculous. If he wasn't there, oh my God, they would be giving up everything. Okay. This isn't even a running league, Lance. Do you realize that?
No.
Teams don't run the ball. They just do against Pittsburgh, and they shred them every single week.
To that point,
awful that point, defensive team.
Teams run it about 28 times against the Steelers, which that number is obscene. It's just insane that teams run it that much. That means, you're basically terrible. I mean, that's just what it does.
Nutshell, that's it right there.
I mean, you're just terrible. You're terrible stopping a run.
Yeah,
what about Kevin Colbert?
Well, let me ask
and
this
Mel,
first.
let me just put as the contractor. So we're saying Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin, the Steelers are solid there, and their foundation is solid there moving forward as the two general contractors, GM, head coach. That foundation is solid. Are we also saying that the two top coordinators, that is solid as well, and that the issue might be at the position coaching level as they move forward to re-solidify this foundation? Is that what we're saying?
I think you have a coaching staff that has been assembled over the last 2 years in a very deliberate and very specific manner. What I mean by that is Tomlin and Butler are the only two on that staff. That's not true. Prominent ones anyway. They have changed out most of their position assistants over the last 2 seasons. Most of those guys are either in their first year or their second year with this team. Jerry O is still there. Butler is still there. I think there was another one at one point that I looked at, but by and large, they have a completely new coaching staff. And that is also a part of the sexy tanking theory. I feel they were building for this for time now. I think they saw that this is probably inevitable. Not, they're going to try. They're going to put their best foot forward and try to win, but you can see the writing on the wall. They also changed out their cap guy. Keep that in mind. They are undergoing an organizational shift from what they were doing. And I think it was high time to do that. The results of that, I think we can say might be kind of mixed. I don't think they planned on Richard Mann not being there anymore. I think Daryl Drake was a tremendous loss for them. He's not somebody they were going to get rid of. So you have other events that come in that affect that foundation, but they very deliberately changed out their position coaches to get into the position that they're in right now. I don't think any one of them can honestly say what they did this year was outstanding. At the same time, I'm not putting 100% of the blame on them. And I'm also not saying that we need to decide whose head needs to roll for all of this. Somebody asked earlier in the questions, what about Kevin Colbert? What about him? He's just as guilty as everybody else. This is a bad football team right now. At the same time, though, we've been telling you all year, this was inevitable. This was going to happen. I didn't say that in the sense that they're doing it because Kevin Colbert sucks and he has no idea what he's doing. I'm saying it because they didn't have much of a choice. They didn't have options. They did the best that they probably could do, and they're going to finish pretty much exactly where I said they were going to finish. And it's not because they're terrible. It's because they didn't have much of an opportunity to build the team the way that they want to. At the same time, you've got 6 rookies that play a substantial amount of time on this team. You've got a full complement of draft picks minus the cursed 5th round pick that they hate so much. They trade every year, 3 years out now. They are able to bring in more players to fit with where they're trying to go as a franchise. They need to identify a quarterback. I know that. There are other positions that they need to address. I always thought this was the year they were going to go after the offensive linemen because offensive linemen are kind of expensive. We're going to see moves, not Joe Haig moves, real moves on the offensive line this season. We're going to see them invest in immediate players, probably in the first and second round. And we're going to get a better sense of what the real plan of this team was. It's a mistake, though, to act as if this was not put in motion previously. So the foundation was built, Lance, to your exact point. The position coaches they brought in, I think, were brought in because they wanted to get younger, because they were going to be playing a lot younger in 2 years, which is where they're going to be next year when they are probably one of, if not the youngest team in the NFL.
That's interesting that you say that. And so I think what we're saying is we're looking at, when you look at the assistant coaches, you got Eddie Faulkner, Ike Hilliard. We're looking at Adrian Clem being out. Alfredo Roberts, the tight end coach. Mike Sullivan is the quarterback coach. Chris Morgan.
First year. And keep in mind, too, Alfredo Roberts replaced James Daniels, who I think was the tight ends coach the first year the tight end was invented in the NFL. That guy's been around forever. You know, he retired. Good for him. I wish him well. They wanted to get younger because they needed to. They needed to find players to play in a more modern NFL, and they found coaches that are probably closer to them in age than they ever have. They're all young guys, really.
And you've got Grady Brown, who's new, and 1 year as a coach, secondaries coach. Carl Dunbar, who's regarded as one of the best.
Dunbar, I forgot about. And Dunbar's a fantastic coach. Nobody will
he's
tell
one
you
of the best. Yeah, and everybody talks. They laud him. I read an article recently about, just the glowing things that TJ Watt and other guys have said about Dunbar. So I think what we're saying is and we'll talk about this because I want to talk about this on the next episode of the show as well, because we're starting to run a little bit long, so we're saying that the foundation is solid on the organizational side with the general contractor in Colbert and Mike Tomlin, and Clem will be moved out, but that piece is generally solid, and the ownership group is solid as well with the Rooneys. And so that foundational piece is solid, which gives them the ability to then move on. And to Grayson's point, and charmingly sophisticated, maybe that is the land. Maybe that's the land in which you build your football team on, is the solid organization. That metaphorically, if you don't have that solid land, which is your organization, which is your ownership group or your coaching staff, and so on and so forth, that you can't build, that's the floor to that first definition of foundation, that's that floor, that solid floor plan, that's the land, is you're building it on the organizational side. In our next episode, we'll talk about the foundational pieces on the team side, on the player personnel side. But before we get out of here, Neal, take a look at, and I just want to digress a little bit. In your crystal ball, if you're looking at your crystal ball right now, because we're really late in the season, you got a couple of games left, and we'll predict the next game for the Steelers. I believe it's against the Browns on Monday night. What's the best team? Give me your AFC championship and NFC championship games. If you were looking to a crystal ball, I know it's hard to predict. COVID is killing the league.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty hard.
I'm willing to bet there's going to be a dramatic and miraculous turnaround for COVID in the NFL right around mid-January.
Well, they're not testing anybody anymore. So
that's what I mean. They're just going to ignore it.
Yes. So they've decided not to test.
They've decided this isn't worth it. And maybe it wasn't the whole time. I don't know.
They decided not to test and assume that everybody was asymptomatic when it wasn't the case. So,
they collectively bargained that nobody has COVID.
Yes, they're going to play the games. They're going to play the game. And I don't want to put it all on the NFL. Before I get your NFC, AFC championship, what do you think that those games will be? It's not simply on the NFL. These decisions are made from the league side and the player side. The players don't want to give up checks. The players do not want to miss checks because of forfeited games. You might have forfeited games if the NFL said if games are forfeit via COVID that you'll get paid. Then you might see some different movement, so on and so forth. But The owners want to get paid and the players want to get paid. Everybody wants their money. So if players can go out and play asymptomatic, but as asymptomatic guys, they're going to do that so they can get those checks. I mean, it's just both sides, making those tough choices. They all want to get paid. I mean, they're all capitalists. We're all capitalists. Guys want to get paid. Hey, man, where my money at? I mean, that's what it comes down to. But give me your AFC Championship game as you see it. Neal Stradamus and give me what you think your NFC and AFC Championship games will be.
I'm not going to be very creative or original with this, even though all signs kind of suggest to us that something crazy is going to happen in the playoffs. But I don't see Green Bay getting beat by anybody in the NFC. And I would say talent-wise, the Rams are as good as anybody. Those are the two teams that I would look at probably above anything else in the NFC. We don't know what's going to happen. If I was predicting it now, I just think Green Bay is just going to be too much. I think Green Bay is going to the Super Bowl. I think Green Bay wins that game. I think Rodgers, unfortunately, is unanimous MVP selection. That's not even debatable anymore. Sucks. I don't like Aaron Rodgers, but he's going to win that. In the AFC, I think you're seeing the exact same thing with Kansas City. Who's going to beat Kansas City now? We're seeing now how fragile New England is. While they've done, I think, an excellent job, and they're a very good team.
They hit him.
Bills put the screws to them yesterday. I think that little brother complex that the Bills have kind of overcomes the, I don't want to say chicanery from Bill Belichick, but Belichick unloaded a game plan on them. There's no way that Buffalo was ready and prepared for. And that really caught Sean McDermott square in the mouth. He knows it. So he came out and they beat him up pretty good yesterday. That was a bloodbath.
Yeah. It could have been worse. They left at least 6 to 9 points on the board. They took them off the board.
So I want to say, in a way, I think that the Buffalo is probably the second best team. But I don't know. You want to bet against Belichick in the playoffs? I don't. So I think I would go with Kansas City and New England. Yet again, that's an Arrowhead, and I think Kansas City wins. And I think right now, probably Kansas City to win it all would be the way that I'd go with it.
I'm gonna shock you on the AFC side, and there's one last Steeler topic that I want to talk about before we get out of here. I'm gonna go with Chiefs Colts in the AFC Championship game. I don't know how this is going to work out with seeding. I'm just throwing it out there.
I like that.
The Colts are the 5 seed. I think the Colts, if they can figure out a way to have Carson Wentz not lose games for them, if they can figure that out, I think they're going to go. They're going to go to the AFC Championship because other than the Carson Wentz piece, they're ready to roll. I love the way they play, I love their offense. I love what Jonathan Taylor is doing. They get big plays. They just need him to not turn the ball over and make the schemed up stuff that are layups. And sometimes he's missing the layups that he's got to make. If he can make the layups,
got some bad ones.
If he can make the layups, they can be dangerous. NFC side, I think it's Green Bay and Tampa Bay. I think the Godwin injury is big.
That hurts a lot.
Big for Tampa Bay. If Godwin was healthy, Tampa Bay is going to Super Bowl. I'm still putting Tampa Bay. So I'm going Tampa Bay, Green Bay in the NFC Championship. You give me Brady against Rodgers, I'm taking Brady all day, every day. Tom,
and he's proved that.
Tom, when he plays against Aaron Rodgers, he tends to say, "Look, man, there's no debate here. I'm me, you're you. There are still different levels to this. I'm me, you're you."
I spanked Peyton before you were here.
Yes.
Shake me a hella different. Hey, can I break in with some news here, Lance?
Yes, absolutely.
Confirmed by CBS college football reporter Pete Thamel, Steelers offensive line coach Adrian Clem is departing for Oregon, where he will be the offensive line coach, run game coordinator, and assistant head coach. Talked to Mike Tomlin and is being let out today to start his new job. So the Steelers formally do not have an offensive line coach. And I would imagine Chris Morgan will be the interim offensive line coach for the remainder of this godforsaken, desolate season. And I don't like Morgan's chances of taking over next year.
No, he will not.
They, for the third year in a row, the Steelers will be searching for a new offensive line coach.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot of fans on Twitter who will be raising their hands to be the offensive line coach. So that's basically Kick Rocks guy. That's Kick Rocks. He's like, yeah, I know I'm not coming back. Let me just go ahead to Oregon. The weather's a little bit better. We can get started on this. Let's go ahead and get out of here. The bags were packed yesterday. They just announced it today. So, like you said, and we went back and forth.
He did not weigh the
done.
Steelers offensive line coach job with the Oregon offensive line coach job, along with the run game coordinator, ever prestigious assistant head coach title. He was told to strongly investigate his options before the season ends because he's going to be out of a job very quickly.
Yes.
That clearly just didn't work. And it's, you know what? I'm sure he's a nice guy. I don't like to see people fail. Certainly not on my team. I wish him the best, but I don't think the situation matched where he was as a coach.
Here's a good thing for him is he got a chance to cut his teeth at the pro level, and he will take these experiences to Oregon and be a better coach. I mean, these are all learning experiences for coaches. And so, he learned and he'll be better for Oregon. And I'm sure Steeler fans will be like, dang, he went to Oregon and the Oregon run game is fantastic. Why couldn't he do that for the Steelers? It's not apples and apples, oranges and oranges, whatever the saying is. That just happens. Let's close the show with this DPOY debate. TJ Watt, 17 and a half sacks leading the NFL?
Yeah.
Does a game like this, where they get absolutely destroyed 36-10, and he has no impact in the game, does this hurt his chances moving forward? Is the award still open? Because this defense is bad. I mean, this defense is bad. And my perspective has always been, I would never give awards to teams that, one, don't make the playoffs. I'm kind of old school in that way. And two, a defensive unit that's pretty much trash. So does a game like this hurt his chances, in your opinion, to be defensive player of the year? Or is it an award that's just looked at individually? Like, if you got a bunch of sacks or a bunch of interceptions, we don't care if you're 2-15. If you got 15 picks, you're going to be defensive player of the year. Is it that type of award? Because I would not give it to him, because the defense is bad and the team is bad.
I don't think on its face right now, TJ Watt is at a point where he's a shoo-in by any stretch. I do think we have plenty of examples in games where TJ Watt's presence and production propelled his team forward. I think his cumulative stats certainly point to the level of somebody that would be defensive player of the year. I think there are a lot of things that he has going for him, but the way he played Sunday, and I'm not blaming his level of play, he's clearly not healthy. And that, to me, only really suggests he's not going to have an impact next week either. I don't know how many non-impacting games one can have and still be a defensive player of the year. But when Aaron Donald is in the NFL, it's a lot harder to be able to get away with that. I don't know if there is a standout. So what that really says is there's going to be basically a runoff vote, and whoever gets defensive player of the year is going to get 9 of 50 first place votes, So to me, I think that's kind of where Watt's candidacy becomes legitimate. The best of what's left in a year that nobody really grabbed it and ran with it. Last year, it was obvious the top two candidates were Aaron Donald and TJ Watt. And to be honest with you, I've gone on record as saying this. It's not going to make Steelers fans happy, but I would have probably voted for Donald. But I also would have been fine. I could see why either one of them would have won it. And the voters felt the same way. I think the first place voting went something like 27-23 for Donald. That's a very thin margin. I don't think anybody this year is worth 27 first place votes. And I don't think we're going to see even a majority of first place votes going to any candidate. I think Watt has certainly shown those bona fides. I think he has put up that level of production at times, but if he's limping down the stretch, they're going to remember that. And to your point, it's hard to ignore. While it shouldn't be, defensive player of the year does not mean valuable player. As an individual, doing his job, his assignments, doing the things that he is supposed to do, he is an outstanding player. He is clearly one of the best in the league. I think he did enough to be in the conversation. Where I sit now, I don't know if there is anybody better. Garrett has the same issues. He just hasn't produced as much. So I don't know who I would give it to in any strong sense right now anyway, but it is going to get in the heads of the voters that the Steelers defense has utterly collapsed over the last couple weeks. So right where I sit now, I would think it's a toss up. He's going to get some first place votes. I would not guarantee right now that anybody would get more than maybe 15. I don't know who that person is.
Before we get out of here, I want to acknowledge this is, and I put this post up at the end of the show. This is significant for us. We got a comment from Anahaknar Maknak, whatever this guy's name is. And he wrote vum.ong. This is significant because we're reaching a larger audience. When you get these weird comments on your show, it is significant. It means you're reaching a big enough audience that random
spam actually cares about you.
Spam actually cares about you. This is fantastic. Thank you, Amik Chaknar Maknak, with the vum.ong comment. Spam cares. Yes, we are growing. That is the encouragement that I needed for the 2022 season. We got spammed. Yes,
just a note for the listeners, please do not go to voom.ong. Whatever the hell that means.
Voom.ong is not a show sponsor. Please, disclaimer, if you type voom.ong in your computer, it may explode. So do not do that. But with that, we're going to conclude the program. Neal, is there anything you want to spotlight this week for the site? You usually say no, so I stopped asking. But is there anything on Steelers Wire that you want to draw listeners to for the week?
I'll be honest with you, Lance. I barely know where I am in the world right now, let alone what's on Steelers Wire. So I would say go check it out, please. Give it a look. I really didn't read a whole lot of this last night. There are a few network things that I have to do later in the evening on Sunday, and I was dead ass tired when I was done with that. I was in bed by like 9:30 or 10, somewhere in there. I did not feel the need to read any Steelers coverage after that game. Sorry, Kurt. No offense. I didn't care. I didn't, I'm sure the traffic reflects that, but that happens in the NFL season. But go check it out. I'm sure there are good perspectives on there. I think it'll be interesting to get Kurt's take on the Clem news, which is significant in my mind. Most teams don't hire offensive line coaches 3 years in a row like that. A little bit different. We'll see what direction they go here.
The infamous POPE, Kurt Popejoy. So make sure you check out his fantastic work on Steelers Wire. But with that, we're going to get out of here. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. And happy holidays from the new standard, from us to you. Thank you all. Good night.